Very much for joining us, and welcome to South Africa and welcome to the SABC.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's start with Tanzania because that's just happened. Result has come through, and for many, many years, the ruling party, the Chama cha Mapinduzi, was always winning the elections comfortably. They said that this year it was going to be a close race. They say the ruling party's won by 58%. The opposition is saying, hang on, we won by 62%. Does that change the dynamic in terms of rest and peace in Tanzania?
First of all, for the people who've been following elections in Africa, this is not a very different story. We've seen the incumbents enter into elections, for lack of a better word, when they are sure that they've won even before the ballots. And the opposition, every time the election is concluded, they come up and claim, okay, there's this, there's that, and they want the vote to be overturned. But normally there's such noise after an election, but it's not brought about change. And I don't think there's too much hope that the opposition in Tanzania will change the results.
Although it is a concern that in Zanzibar, their elections there were annulled because of gross irregularities, and it's a concern that close by, this autonomous region would have their elections annulled at the same time that the opposition are saying, hang on, these elections are not free and fair.
I don't want to say that I'm imagining something that is not existing, but this is a developing story altogether. Because in Tanzania, just like these other countries that have gone through elections in Africa, what has been happening is that whenever there are some such grievances, post-election grievances, they might end up in court. And when they end up in court, yes, the court might say, okay, it happened, but not substantial enough to overturn an election. So what happened in Zanzibar, there's a huge number of people who voted, but the court might say it's not substantial enough to overturn an election. And again, the opposition will complain, but the winner will stand.
All right, let's turn to your country, Uganda. It looks like President Museveni is going to run again next year, extend his rule there. But there's always this tension once the names are announced. Anybody who puts his name forward, we saw earlier this year, Besigye and also the former Prime Minister suddenly getting detained. Is this something that we sadly see a lot, where opposition parties and opposition figures start to feel the pressure once they step into the space of trying to take on the incumbent?
The last 10 years in Uganda have witnessed what one would call a total change in the dynamics of the political arena in the country. Because when it first happened in 2001, the arrest of the opposition, the suppression of their rights, it was making headlines everywhere. But it so happens that a little bit people are getting used to this. Arrest of opposition political leaders is getting common. And I don't know if they're getting harder, because we are seeing Dr. Besigye has been there 3 times and he wants to come again. So President Museveni, I think he won't change his winning tactic, and the opposition are yet to face it again.
Right. Is he that popular, President Museveni?
Among some people, he is. Others think he's forcing himself on them. But he claims he won the election, but the opposition says the other. The opposition believes, okay, they've won him before, but he won't accept. Because you might recall years back in 2006, after the election, Besigye went to court, citing malpractices. But again, the court said, okay, yes, there were malpractices, but not enough to change results.
Okay, not too far away. We read a story earlier. Burundi, they had the elections, contested sort of constitutional decision about running for a 3rd term. What does this do for the region? Because a lot of people are fleeing Burundi and going into neighboring states.
First of all, this is very unfortunate. For a country like Burundi that has a history of conflict, everyone was very happy to see Burundi overcome a long-term civil war that claimed lots of lives. And when the region came together and tried to help Burundi organize themselves and have they have peace in their country, it was a huge congratulations to everyone. And everyone wanted to see Burundi moving forward. But to see that the very leaders that saw Burundi go through the political tension at that time, being that they are the very leaders in office, and then they cannot help the country move forward, but still see people come on streets, burn tires, people fleeing their own country. It makes the region very unstable. and moving forward unless there's political dialogue that will bring a conclusion to this. Burundi is still a worrying story.
And Uganda has been chosen as almost like a peacemaker in the area, but making very little headway. What is it about Uganda, do you think, that they were chosen to try and make peace there?
Uganda being chosen, I think, has much to do with the history, because in the last civil war, Uganda played a very instrumental role. And even this time, they thought maybe Uganda could do the same. But maybe the political arena has changed the other side, and President Nkurunziza in Burundi might not be available to listen to President Museveni like he did previously. Because, you know, for over the years, he has created new friends, and on the other hand, possibly created more enemies. Maybe his relationship with Uganda has deteriorated over a period of time. So we look forward to see what might come out of there. So you cannot conclude and say, okay, if Uganda is in, it's deal done. Not yet.
All right. I know that you keep your hand on East African politics, but perhaps as a final question, if you could just give me your sense of where we're at on the continent, particularly around elections, democracy moving forward, presidents wanting to stay in power and not letting go, and some countries that are actually following their constitutions and moving on. What's your sense overall of the continent as we move forward?
The question of staying in power is much more associated with greed. And then when you look at the history of post-colonial governments, they've not been elected to power. Most of them, they've captured power by the use of the gun. So they have a strong attachment to the gun. So they think the ballot paper is too small to eject them out of office. And because of their history, when you look at corruption, human rights abuses, it has created many enemies for them. And I imagine most of them have not prepared for post-leadership visions. So they are worried of leaving office. They are worried of prosecution. Maybe African governments have got to think that, okay, what happens to a person if he leaves office? So that these people are motivated to leave office. Other than that, they'll stick there because they fear the life outside that office.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed for your insights, and thank you for joining us and visiting us in our studios here, and wish you the best of luck when you get back to Kampala in Uganda. Julius, thank you very much indeed.